And each year, I say that next year I'm gonna reach my goal of being able to recite pi all the way to 762 digits or places after the decimal point. This is not one of them. Yeah.
How far can you get?
Well, you know, for a long time, I've been able to get over 100. What I should be doing is pacing myself, and every once in a while I tune it up to like 150 or 200, and then it drops back. But I can largely count on 100, I think. Huh? Yeah. You want to look it up? And stay. I know someone's got to look it up to make sure I don't make a mistake.
Why specifically 762?
760. I got a couple of people here. You, right, and you, and now Oliver. 762 is made famous because Richard Feynman, the physicist, Richard Feynman, jokingly, in making a speech, once said that one of the greatest ambitions of his life, since he almost single-handedly developed quantum electrodynamic theory, I'd say he has plenty of accomplishment. He didn't die a slacker. But he never did memorize up to 762 like he said he wished he could, because 762nd digit after the decimal point is a 9. And so are the 5 digits before it. So he wanted to say all of this, because you know, an irrational number never terminates. There's no pattern, like it's not 0.12, 12, 12 forever and ever. And it never repeats, and it never terminates. Like if you divide, if you divide 100 by 4, and you do it with long division, you know, it terminates it after just 2 digits.
Does your pi have all the numbers?
There's no such thing as having all the numbers of pi, but it is all numbers of pi. Yes. And I learned that this tie, when I put it on for the first time today, it's tucked in, and it's like I could wrap it around me a couple of times, I think. It's like, I think I got a bargain because they made it for the big and really tall, and I'm not really tall. So I tied it, and this went to here, and it still was like to my knees with the other piece of it. It's like, I don't have to cut it off. So I had to tuck it in. It feels funny. It's like, oh, I got something. Something's on my shirt. Which is true. Do you have a pie here? You ready?
I have it.
You have it too? Okay. You gonna keep me on? Okay. 3.1415925.
No.
3.1415. Let's see. 3.1415. 8979. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. 3.1415. 9265. 35. 8979. 3238. 4626. 4338. 3279. 5028, 8419, 7169, 3993, 7510, 5820, 9749, 4459, 2307, 062, no, 230.
No.
I'm going back. 2307. Let's see. Let me go back to some place that I can start because I lost my place. I'll go back to the 50th decimal point. The 50th decimal point is a 0, and the 51st, and it's in a run of 7510. And then after 7510 is 5820, 9749 4459 2307. And here's where I got stuck, but I'll get it this time. 2307 8164 0628 6208 let's see, 6208 9986 2803 let's see, 2803 4825 3421 1706 and then 79, and that's 100. And then it goes on 82 1480. Anyway, that's as far as I. Is that right?
We're gonna give.
Yeah, there's a guy who's a savant in England that he's a high-functioning autistic and a meth savant, and he's probably not even the record anymore, but he broke 10,000 or something like that. He just keeps going and going. He can just see it continue. It just continues in visually from him.
What's the reason you decided to memorize 100 digits?
Because I can. No, do you ever go to the gym? Do you bench press? Do you bench press?
Rarely.
What do you do, squats? Is that your big
Squats, yeah.
exercise? What good does it do?
Helps with strength.
It makes you better at tasks that those facilities that that equipment you use to accomplish an exercise gets strengthened. And so when I memorize pretty much anything, then my ability to memorize is practiced. Does that make
So
sense?
it's like an exercise, I guess you would say.
Yeah, same thing. If you don't, a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't use math, so I don't take it." I hear all kinds of jokes when people are doing this. I'm proud because I'm not intellectual thing. I'm a proud idiot kind of thing. I don't know math. Waste my time with math. It raises your IQ. It helps you with everything. So when people make fun of it, it's like making fun of you because you're not accomplishing anything by going to the gym. When you are, you're making it so your body works better in every way. Change your body composition. It actually raises your IQ to go to the gym. I mean, literally. I don't know about that's what I use. In case of every 4 digits has another card with everything preceding it. And so it's the same way I memorize scripture. By whole books of scripture. You're capable of doing it. All of us are capable of doing that. I don't have a particularly good memory. It's a discipline. It's a learned discipline.
So when you're memorizing that, would you like clumping? Because I noticed when you were saying all
Yes,
the
uh-huh.
you were like pausing.
I did it by 4, except 3-5. That little 3-5 run. I have no idea why. But when I looked at the whole thing and shifted it around to see where to start the clumps of 4, they just went better that way. A lot of the things I use for memory devices, at least until it takes on its own existence in my mind, the scaffolding that I use, a lot of it is I borrow from the periodic table, and I borrow from police and fire 10, 11, and 9 code. So some of those things mean something to me. For instance, the clump from 55 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 59, 60, 61, 62. 9749, 4459. Mnemonic for that is if you're 97 before you're even 49, 1097 means arrived on scene, 49 means en route. So if you're there before you even get en route, I equate that with being too, you're too stressed about it. And 1144 is a death. So 4459 is if you do like that, you'll be dead before you're 59. So, I mean, that's just an example of the kind of stories. Some of them, they're not tellable.
Do you know any Bible books?
Yeah.
I remember.
On and off. They come and go. That's the first big project I did was my freshman year at PUC. Fall quarter, I memorized the book of James using flashcards. I went to the Lost and Found and got 2 Bibles that were identical, 2 King James, because they're printed front to back. Cut out verses and stuck them on 3x5 cards and wrote the verse on it, and I memorized it. James, the servant of God and the Lord Jesus Christ, of the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting my brethren, Ken, and Joey, you fall in diverse temptations, knowing this, the trying of faith, work of patience, will let patience have a perfect work, who is heard from desire, wanting nothing. If any of your life was in the mass of God, give it to all men, liberty, on and on.
So when you do this, for you to own it forever, how often do you revisit it?
If I wasn't ever gonna find it all rusty and everything, well, some things they're just there. I'm not gonna forget the song "Jesus Loves Me." I mean, is there anywhere in here you say the last thing to go would be John 3:16? You're probably gonna know John 3:16 and maybe the Lord's Prayer.
But how, what's your technique for you to remember, the 100?
I forget.
Pi.
Oh, for pi?
Yeah, something like that you don't use every day.
I just did it. I did it so many times, and then when I extend past it, like I get up into the 200s, I'm reviewing that as I go,
Okay.
and so it sticks. I get a little rusty, like on the periodic table when I don't do chemistry. I can get through it usually, but I probably have to brush up to get through the periodic table, that kind of thing. But when I was taking chemistry, I had not just the symbols and names and atomic number, but I memorized the weights and the electron configuration. I could alphabet by memory for the whole table. There's no reason not to.
Do you learn from these things in order to ask them to recite the verse from James?
Yeah, with James, when I've practiced it up, I can just go to it. I have landmarks. But then I have to go to a landmark. Like you saw me with these digits of pi, I had to go back to something that I knew once I got sideways. But when I practice a Bible verse, and I use this as a meditation, I use this in the Gospels as a meditation, with just like words of Christ, trying to go through a whole book. And I have a card, and I have sheets that I printed on the laser printer that go tiny little print that go from left to right. There's little tiny grids, so I have 1,000 check marks. And I'll read the thing and check it. Read it, check it, 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 read it, check it. And after about 30 or 40, then I can set it down and then if I think about it, I can do it. But I have to pick it back up because I start making mistakes. But after a little while, when en route to 1,000, even with long verses, after a little while, it runs itself. Like when you're driving a car and you can do all kinds of other things, and it can go, and I can keep seeing it while I do other things, even reading other things. I'm not reading them out loud, obviously, my mouth is busy. But it's almost like a part of you that breaks off, like when you get really good at doing something. Picture when you're a little kid, how hard it is when you're dribbling a basketball. When little guys are trying to learn, little gals are trying to learn how to dribble, it goes everywhere, you know, but then you get to the point where, you know, you don't even have to, it's just natural, right? You don't have to think about it when you dribble a ball, right? You could talk while you dribble. You could come up and give a report while you dribble. It's nothing. It's not even like you're having to do it. Your arm just does it, right? So it gets to the point where the whole verse goes. And then, after that, you do that for many days, you'll find that it's running in the background involuntarily when you're doing other things. It just plays itself like the TV turned itself on, that's kind of cool. Because you know that that part of you that's underneath or that's in the back room, it's in there. And that's the part that whoever's the door guy, you know, the bouncer at the door of the back room in the mine, when you try to go in there and say, oh, we're going to change that, it's like, you're not. You don't have ID, you don't pay the cover charge, you're not coming in here. So the bouncer never lets you back in there. But when it gets back in there, you know you put it where it belongs. So it's kind of a cool process. And repetitive scripture like that is also a euphoric meditation. It gives you sort of too much endorphins, like when you run too hard. You know, when you have it trained up to it and you push it by an extra 5 miles, and then the sky is so blue today. You know, it's like, and I'm so hungry. So anyway, yes.
Do you ever feel like memorizing all these things out of letters of your head? You know, things get mixed up or it's just too much information?
No, there's between 85 billion and 100 billion neurons. And each one of them has an average in excess of 1,000 connections. If you only had 50 with that kind of connectivity, the number of connections would exceed the estimated number of particles in the known universe. And each connection that's made, think about this, every combination of connections can be unique information. And there's not even a metaphor for describing. I mean, once you run out of particles in the universe, there's not even any way to exaggerate the picture of that. And that's just how many potential actual from one nerve to another nerve. And each nerve can choose to do on each one of those connections, possibly given timing and neurotransmitters and different cocktails of neurotransmitters, there might be millions of ways for every one of those connections to be utilized to communicate information to each other neuron. It's kind of a mind, I mean, it's just, you can think of it as infinite. Because there's nothing in nature to compare it to, like grains of sand, or, I mean, since we're already talking beyond the actual particles in any one time in the universe, there's nothing to compare it to. So for all natural purposes, your memory is infinite. Isn't that cool?
Why do you memorize the Bible verse?
Thy word have I hid in my heart that I might not sin against thee.
That's what I was going to say.
Really?
I was going to ask if it was because of that verse.
Cool. You know, that verse kind of rationalizes it. The way I really look at it, I don't memorize Psalms like that or Leviticus or Romans. I limit it to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the book of James. I don't fool with the rest. I feel like I have a reasonable command of the rest. I kind of know where most things are in the Bible. And I read it all the time and study with it. But I'm not going to, until I've got all of the Gospels nailed so they'll never go away as much as I know John 3:16 and the book of James, I'm not going to fool with anything else. Because everything else would be like why are you doing this when you have better than that? To me. Yes. I'm sorry? Can I please name everyone in class? Well, let me say this. Probably, but I really want to get to where we get all these presentations done, and I have a movie for Thursday, and I want to make it so that we don't have anything in the way of that. And that's our last day, isn't it? I mean, other than isn't this dead week? I mean, you don't want to skip the final. You want to have the final, right? Because you want the points, right?
Are we gonna have an auction at some point?
Yeah, we'll do an auction. That's what asked me Peter. Oh, Peter asked me about the auction. Oh. There's another thing too, and it's a kind of a consternation for me because I don't like it, but there's a number of things that I don't like, I find. and I feel duty bound though to address it. You haven't done anything wrong, don't worry. It's not like that. I consistently say that I don't offer incentives for filling out the course evaluation things, because I know that it waters down the data. It makes it so that when I look at the data, it's not spontaneous. It's not someone who cared enough to just go do it on the basis of, boy, this guy really needs help, or I really got something out of this class. When you get nothing out of it, the only people that fill it out are likely, in my opinion, to be people that have got something to say. They're not just going through the motions. When someone makes me do a survey so that I can look at the stupid clickbait and find out I didn't want to see it anyway, how seriously do you think I take the stupid survey? You know, asking me some stupid idiot stuff like my calf and bicep measurements. So I mean, yeah, I've got 80 biceps and 120 calves, you know, whatever. I don't put anything into it. So as a result, I'll get about 15 or so in a class this size, just spontaneously. And there's almost always like 2 people that have found out, apparently, that I am the Antichrist. And that I've murdered their parents or something. And it's like, the things in the comments are like, come on, you gotta be kidding me, I didn't do that, you know? And then there's a few people who give a really balanced thing, and they're really thoughtful and sometimes lengthy narratives. And then there's people who are like, this is a couple people that I connected with, and this happens with every professor. There's combinations of personalities. Some people will say, just, you know, finally, after all this time at PUC, after the 9 years I've been here, you know, my fifth senior year, you know, and I finally connect with somebody. Anyway, but I take those to be spontaneous, like if someone just dropped me an email, and I was like, oh, I put a lot into that. So when teachers go, you know, I'll take you on an airplane ride to Tahiti instead of a final or something. You know, we're gonna go jet skiing instead of, you know, whatever. I think that their data is crap for the most part. But the chair put out a blanket thing to everybody saying, hey, when we don't have high percentage of the people in the class completing these things, then it threatens our accreditation status. And I'm going, well, you talk about the tail wagging the dog. We want you to generate crap data instead of less, but actually useful data. So it's not his fault, and it's not the administration's fault. It's it's systematic in not just even the education system, but probably in our culture right now. Misunderstanding data. We just want lots of it. We don't care if it's good data. We just want a lot. Input. Say, yeah, but none of it's true. That's right. Put it in. I don't care if it's true. Just I want it loud, fast. So, nevertheless, receiving compensation for doing this and agreeing to be a cooperative instructor, I don't ever want to just dismiss the things that the chairperson says. I believe in respect and cooperation. So I'm not, and you're not allowed to bribe people individually because you can't tell that they've done it. There's no way to indicate who has and hasn't filled the thing out. So if you just put everyone in a duty system, I'll give you $1 million if you do it. 3 of you have done it, and you all claim to be one of the 3. That's the problem. So I'm not sure what kind of thing is a premium kind of I want to say threat, but not threat, positive reinforcement incentive. But I'm inclined to say let's say if 80% of the class, the things are open now, right? Are the evaluations actually up? They open tomorrow? They don't give you very much time, do they? Okay, okay, they open tomorrow. If when you come to class on Thursday, if 80% of you have filled the thing out, you've submitted one, whatever you have to do to get it. I don't even know if they make you answer them all. Can you just skip a bunch and say, okay, I've done it? I don't even know that. They require you actually put something, right? Okay. If 80% of you make it so there's some data of some kind on that, by the time we meet on Thursday, then I will, instead of giving you the quiz that's ready for Thursday, I'll give you all 100% on the quiz. Is that adequate? Yes. But it requires, the freeloader problem, you know about the freeloader problem, free ride issue in crowd psychology, group psychology. Everyone thinks someone else will take care of it and they'll be part of the 20%. But that's risky, you just never know. So, I mean, is that the kind of incentive that would get it so that we'll have this like unbelievable amount of crap data? And in the process, the thing is, I have no way to tell. It's like, no, I gotta check out points. Even if you're a sincere person, you're in a hurry and everything. I would love it if it was actually real, if you really actually put your opinion and your heart into it. I'd love that. That would just be bonus. But I'm not gonna tell.
Okay, so hypothetically speaking, if that does happen, do we still get like the key with the quiz or if it's gonna be on the final?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a great question. Yeah, I won't make it so that I tricked you. Or I'll make it even easier on you. It just won't be on the final.
Okay, that sounds good.
Is that even better?
Sounds better.
The final's going to weigh what the final's going to weigh, and it'll just be less material to have to look at. That's even more incentive, right?
Yeah.
So it'll actually shorten your final. Because I'd love to. I mean, if that's what, if that's the outstanding for the chair, he's happy and his boss is happy and their boss is happy, then I'd love to do that. I don't think I'm getting in any kind of hot water if I don't do it, just in the spirit of being cooperative. Fair? Okay.
There is, it's like the second to last page of the syllabus, and it's like this list of words.
List of words?
Yeah. And I was just wondering what that would be. They look like keywords of some sort, but I don't really know what they're for.
I know what you're saying.
I think it's like the second.
I'm not going to put that on the test.
Okay.
It's the 10 and 10. It's 2 lists of 10 things. And what they are, here's how you can use them. They form the outline for my personal philosophy, for an example of personal philosophy stuff, like you're trying to generate. It starts out, you can be remarkable. And what I do in that is each of those 10 principles apply to 10 life areas. I make it so that I think every area you can think of life and how it's lived is representable. I can put them in one of those 10 categories. And those 10 principles, those 10 are kind of categories of principles, actually, like intentionality. Do you remember when I told about the 2 old ladies that take turns driving? That illustrates intentionality. Being doing it on purpose instead of letting it be done to you, just like a victim. Intentionality, it's worth doing on purpose. What goes into my mind, I'm going to pick. I don't just turn the TV on because this is the time I watch TV and then just whatever happens to click through, well, I got to see something, I'll get the worst bad, and then sit there and then pour feces into my eyes and ears. I'm just not going to do that. I'm going to be more deliberate. There might be things I want to see, but if there's not, then I'm not going to just settle for anything. Don't settle for anything. So the way I look at it, those 10 and 10 give me an almost infinite number of ways to keep exploring using the same template, the same scaffolding. It gives me a way to keep looking through and digging deeper, because I'll take one of those principles and then combine it with another one and say, what comes to mind, when I come up with that. And then I'll take 3 of them and put those 3 ideas together and think about the 3 together and see what comes up. And then I'll look at each one applying to each life area, then every combination I can come up with of 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. Well, how many, it's a combinatorial problem. It looks like 10 with an exclamation mark after it to figure out how many combinations that gives. And then that with 10 factorial. It's a lot. And it ends up coming up with, I think about things, putting together pieces of life that don't usually get thought about together, that I go, oh, I never thought about that. And then something gets born from it. So I use the 10 and 10 and permutations and combinatorics as an engine to continue to generate a creative quest to deepen my philosophy. So that's my shtick, that's my gimmick in my personal philosophy. Thus, referring to myself, if anyone asks, well, what do you do? What are you? I don't have an elevator pitch. It's just too long. It's just, I'm a curiosopher. So now you see how easy it would be for me to generate from that a statement of my philosophy. I've got a technique that I use, and I can apply it then to all of the things I come up with. I can then say, how does that impact? And then I can take categories of philosophy, like metaphysics. Well, what's metaphysics? Okay, well, my ontology, my epistemology, my axiology, right? And under my values, it branches out further: beauty and ethics, right? Friendship, all that. Does that help? There's some things on there where I made up a word. That makes it kind of hard because it doesn't exist in the dictionary. If you Google it, it just takes you to my website where all I have is about that list, and I started working on it a little bit years and years ago and didn't put my material online completely. So, like, was it quali libre placerism is one of those words. It's like, that doesn't mean anything to everyone. So it would take a whole lecture for each one, and it would take 20 lectures. Make sense? Does anybody want to have, right now, you want to ask or have anything that represents me helping you or anyone else helping you with your paper? Does anyone want to ask anything about the paper so we can say no, or yeah, that's a good thing, or do you have any specific questions about it that haven't been like 50 times asked? Sir? sure. Well, they're not exactly like juxtaposed. Belief would be your philosophy would involve some beliefs. Belief is juxtaposed with knowledge, and that is the philosophical part of the philosophical enterprise to recognize that. But like belief-based things like religion or like superstition or even mythology, I guess you could say, rather than more characteristically philosophical pursuits, would be a belief it's possible to say, I've asked all that I can, and I've backed up with intellectual honesty the best I can. I keep going back, asking questions, and say, well, how is that? And then I answered, and they say, okay, well, then how about this? Then, well, how about this? Like, well, that's made out of this. Well, what's that made out of? Well, this. Well, what's that made out of? Well, this. You could say like, water. You know what water is. You discuss it and talk about oceanography and all that stuff. But you can say, well, what's it made out of? Well, it's H2O. You go, oh, okay. So what's that? You go, well, which one? Well, so it branches off. You go, well, let's just focus on hydrogen. Okay, well then here's what hydrogen is. Here's what we know about hydrogen. Say, oh, so it's a proton, basically, right? It's a proton, and then a transient electron. No neutron. So what's a proton? Oh, so let's talk about protons. And what about the electron? Okay, we'll talk about that too. And you keep going back and back and back, and pretty soon you come back to the part where you've gone back and you say, and that's an up quark. Now what? You're done. You've come against a wall. Now you can only go to belief to talk to me about, as soon as you get to fundamentals, when you get to where there's no going anywhere else, it's it. We don't have the equipment to do anything else with it. Then you can form a belief about it by choice. You can say, okay, I think it's probably like this. You don't know, do you? No. In philosophy, you would chase something to where there's nowhere else you can possibly chase it with what we know, and we don't have any more way to find out that we know of. You get there, and you say, here I am, and now you scratch around trying to find other ways. But what do you believe it probably is? Now, you've heard me describing, like saying we're like the people that live in Flatland, right? But I believe that there's intelligent, even beyond intelligent entities living, that we look like we're living in Flatland to them. 5 dimensions and more. Whereas we're stuck in 4. And we've got things we've illustrated with and everything. Do I know anything about the 5th dimension? I know only what kind of shadow it casts in our reality, if that's even what's going on. Right? But I can tell you, I do actually have a belief structure about it, extrapolating from what it would be like for chalkboard characters to think about us, and then me to think of, and I have mathematical models that I've tried to put into my mind about it. But it's just, I have to acknowledge, honestly, here's what I believe it seems like it probably is. But I'm going to, even in philosophy though, having done all of that without leaving out any steps, going back to where nobody can actually argue with any actual evidence. It's done. I've taken all the evidence available into consideration, and this the evidence doesn't disprove it, but it doesn't prove it either. And there's no more evidence. And nobody knows any more about it. Beyond that, I have a choice. I can be agnostic about the thing, say, I just have no idea. Or I can go on to say, well, how about this? And I build a model and everything. If I get convinced enough about it, I can say, I believe it's something like that. like I believe that there's a God. But I can't prove that there's a God scientifically. And all attempts to are clown attempts, you know. They don't really prove it. Not even when Michio Kaku says it just seems beyond, it's not proven. You could still argue atheistically and not be irrational and not deny actual evidence. He just thinks it seems most probable that there is, and so do I. I agree with him. I believe that there's a God. Do I know it? No. Now, if I didn't approach it like that, I could just approach it religiously and say, I just know, that's all. I just know. It was good enough for my parents. Are you dissing my mom? It's just, that's it. There's no discussion about it, and it's infidelity to even ask questions like, well, how do we know? We just do. See, that is not philosophical. You could be religious and faithfully philosophical at the same time. I like to think that I am approaching that sometimes. I think I fail. Honestly, I'm a tiny little man. There are world-class people in this world, and I look way up to them. I'm a tiny little man, or I would be someplace Ivy League. Most likely they would come looking for me, and they're not. So you're stuck with what you got here, and I do the best I can. And when I recognize that, that's part of my attempt to be philosophical, to be humble and intellectually honest. And Socrates said it was that makes you uncommonly wise. I mean, you're going to meet a lot of people that are really sure. Really sure. I mean, they don't brook any questions. Right? And some of them have bigger IQs than mine. I know some of them. I went to school with some of them. I know they actually have at least 15 IQ points on me. And I'm still shaking my head going, they will absolutely never consider the possibility that they might even have just a nuance that could be improved. They haven't changed their beliefs at all since we arrived when we were teenagers at PUC to start college. That just doesn't strike me as very probably the most ambitious intellectual project. I don't know. If when you came here, you leave with the same exact way of explaining it even, and your picture was set when you were early high school or something, and you get to be my age, and it's still just like it was. Yeah, reality just doesn't fit that very well, I don't think. I don't know. Does that make sense? What I'm saying is not straightforward. It's really fuzzy. It's all over the place. But that's what reality actually is. It's not neat and clean. And parsimony, or trying to find the simplest, briefest, course of existence, Occam's razor, William of Ockham saying nothing should be any more complicated than we should, when we're faced with multiple explanations, we should choose the simplest one. People have faith in that. And it's unwarranted. There's not a shard of evidence, not a scrap of evidence, not an iota of evidence that gets us closer to reality. Reality is not simple. Why are we using that stupid epistemological crutch? I have no idea. I can never get it. I read him. I read all the defenders of him. I hear people say it like they're as committed to that as old Adventists are to a particular kind of Sabbath. They got nothing if you ask them to defend why it is exactly that they don't think you should be able to take a shower and wash yourself on Sabbath morning. They don't. I don't think they. I've heard them try, and they just get louder instead of getting more thoughtful. Loud is not a philosophical. Peter.
I had a question.
Yes.
Rapping, anyways.
for you.
Philosophy can almost be like applied or be in like any subject. Can we like take like a lot of pages to write? Like I don't know. It's like there's a lot of things you could say.
You mean,
like,
can you narrow the field a
yeah,
little?
can you like pretty much like how you view situation or like basic principles since like your philosophy is like always gonna change. Like maybe like basic things you've learned or even just about learning or like changing, I guess.
So you
And
could,
it's
you
maybe
could,
like a basic, like general thing, and then also my second question is like, if you happen to believe something, a philosopher, you know, philosopher believes, like, and maybe I don't know, like, you don't need to like say, oh, I believe, like, or maybe,
like if you articulate that you believe a certain thing,
yeah, you don't have to like
but
find out. who
you
else
didn't
believes it.
actually realize that Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about that, because you just, this quarter didn't get completely through Marcus Aurelius's works. Am I gonna ding you because you didn't identify that he had that thought? Of course not.
Or like
It doesn't even matter that
Like
you have that
Google, like,
thought.
what
If
type
you
of-
have it, that's sufficient. But if you do rely on him, if he sparked you to get something, and it doesn't make sense to just say, oh, I don't need those philosophers. Because we have actually now thousands of years of people building on each other. We can, in months, get to some place that took centuries. That's the gift we have. We're the luckiest people in recorded history. We're so fortunate. And I get so much out of it. I just can't believe these people they didn't even have Amazon. I mean, they couldn't Google anything. They didn't even actually have bound books. They didn't even own any scrolls. They could go and someone might let them look at a scroll. Some of them weren't even literate.
But the first one too is like you can do like a journal or like we can choose what type of philosophy we're writing about. I don't know.
Yeah, it should be your personal philosophy. It's probably better not to say my philosophy of Windsor. Unless it's a metaphor for how you're doing life, and then, okay, I can see it working.
Because like in your example that you gave was like all about science, and I would put the whole thing about science.
Like, what if you would do it for dance? Life is a dance. I think the universe is built on one great dance. I mean, look at what Pythagoras did. The fundamental reality as music, as a song. It's all a big song. And he was dead dog serious. That sounds like a rap star, dead dog serious. That's going to be my rap. Whoa, after all of that, I sat there and I realized to great. I mean, and it was an amazing contribution, and then I said, I can't believe it.
Would it be possible to turn off the AC?
Are you getting a little chilly?
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, there's a willingness. The spirit is willing, but the flesh might not be capable. I'm going with no.
No.
I don't know how. Because all I have is a device that has no actual inputs.
It's on the side of it, the right side. Right.
That's a Molly screw that's abandoned from a prior thermostat that they used to let you control. I know. They believe they know best. It's a trend. In fact, do you realize hotels are doing that in your room? Do you know that they're designing the thermostats so that from the computer at the desk or the home office, the corporate office, they can adjust not just your temperature in your room, but what it says your temperature is. They're doing that, all the major chains.
If you call the facilities management, they'll intelligent this place is cold, they can turn it down for you.
They're not here.
Well, yeah, I know, but like during the day, if I live there and like the issue that person will have to adjust.
Could you do that for me? So that we don't freeze her out on Thursday? If you do it and you come back and tell me, I'll give you another curse dog. Hi.
Can you talk a little bit bit about questions that will be on the final that aren't in the quiz?
Can I talk about questions that are going to be on the final that aren't on the quiz? You know, I'm inclined to make it so that what you got on the final you're already mostly familiar with. You know, it's not a game to try to rack your GPA. I just want to. I mean, I don't even. I wish we didn't even have to do any of it. You know, that we could just talk, and that's that. I wish. So I'm going to try to make it so you do good, and not try to make it so you do bad.
Should I prepare for like an essay question or something, or no?
No, don't prepare for any essay questions except essay questions that I write and you choose.
Oh, okay.
Multiple choice essays.
I like that.
Yeah. If you put stuff for sale that is too good for me to resist, yes. Right. But by the way, March 2 was the last one. I went looking today and it was vacuous.
Now, I'm not begging for more quizzes, but
you're worried.
since we've only had 2 in between the.
But if you had one that was 100% on Thursday, that would help you, right?
I mean, if we had the questions, yeah. But like,
Well, even if you don't have
I'm
questions,
concerned about like the amount of new material that's gonna be on the final.
you haven't had that much, have you?
Not really.
But I can still purchase stuff you sell me, right?
Yeah.
And you'd know. The same 2 extra credit things that were on the midterm will be on the final for extra credit. It's not just you might see stuff you've seen before. You're going to see everything you've seen before. That means old quiz questions too. I mean, if it was on a quiz, you can pick any quiz question you want. It is going to be on the final. There's not like, oh, I hope I studied the right stuff. It's all going to be there. It's all the right stuff.
So it's similar to how the midterm was where it was all quiz questions.
Yes, plus what I purchased, plus anything, you know, that I told you specifically. This is going to be on.
What day and what time is the final?
It's
5:15 on Tuesday.
5:15 on Tuesday. I have it on good authority that it's 5:15 on Tuesday. But you know, I'm going on faith there, not science. I'm right now checking what I consider authoritative sources. Tuesday, 5:15. Tuesday, March 21, 5:15 to 7:15 p.m. 17:15 hours. I'll be right back.
I was just wondering, you could extend the paper. Yes, all your people
Till when?
Hold the final. Sunday? Sunday. Tuesday. Tuesday might just be.
If we get 80%,
No, that's not, we can't rely on that.
if we get 80%,
Yeah, how will we go?
then
I said we do some accountability.
we'll extend it to the final. If we don't get 80%, I'll only extend it until Sunday at midnight. Fair enough? That was worth taking a break from holding your hand up for, right? This is spontaneous. Yeah. I will continue to my questions. Mission control to the satellite orbit, to the philosophy orbiter. I know, it just launched everyone into a sanguine mode. he asked when we would stop buying questions for quizzes and final exam. Until I send the final to the copy center sometime next week. Because I'll buy stuff to the last second.
I don't remember my question, but I'm
You-
pretty sure you didn't pay that.
Who did I not pay? Where's your question?
I don't remember.
Did you stop trying to remember?
No.
That's the problem. Your file clerk says, you might be the boss, but I'm not working until you get out of my file with it.
I'll just email you.
Okay. Totally had your back.
Oh my gosh.
You have a random question? A stochastic question? The what? I eat just about everything with chopsticks. That's true. Why do I do that? And that is a philosophical issue. Why I use chopsticks instead of a fork actually grows out of and is inseparable from intentionality. Every bite that I take when I'm using chopsticks is intentional. There's no shoveling whatever ends up in there. It's intentional. And it causes me to make eating a sacrament instead of just mindlessly doing it. Pretty much. Ice cream, lentils, rice. I don't usually eat ice cream. If I'm out like on my birthday, they bring like the special, hey, it's your birthday, happy birthday to you. You live in a zoo, that kind of thing. If I have it, I will eat it with my chopsticks. I carry them with me at the restaurant. That's true. I always have chopsticks. I have chopsticks. I started doing that when my sensei, who at the time was the assistant sensei, assigned me to learn to bounce a super ball onto cement with it and then catch it, bounce it, catch it, bounce it, catch it. And so I got that part, and I realized in having kind of spending hours with my chopsticks, I said, I really like eating. I've always liked eating with chopsticks. I learned it in 7th grade. I had a teacher who was a Japanese Hawaiian guy that was my 7th grade social studies teacher. And on Fridays, we would have these relay races with chopsticks, and we started out with things that were relatively easy to pick up and move. You know, like a tater tot would be a piece of cake, you know. And you run over there and you do it, and then you hand it off to the other person, and they pick something up and run over whatever. And you keep moving things like that until you get whatever. And then we worked up over the year to where what we were using was actually like smooth chopsticks, like metallic chopsticks, and picking up BBs and running with the BBs. And I got really good at it, so I knew how to do chopsticks. So then my son and I, and we're still not there yet, but my son and I committed to a life goal of being able to each have a pair of chopsticks in each hand. So that's a total of 4 pair of chopsticks. And to be able to juggle super balls between us with the using chopsticks with both hands. So we've each experimented with doing this and with juggling with them, and we both juggle okay, but juggling with chopsticks is a little harder, and juggling together, I think we might have gotten to 10 or something like that, but we're going to get to where we can really reliably do it with something small together.
Do you use spoons when you have to?
Uh,
Like, what about when you're eating soup?
You know, actually, if I'm eating soup, I usually just do this, but I will use a spoon if there's like a real formal situation, but normally I'll just take what I can out of it and then just pick up the whole. Yeah. I don't usually eat soup, but if I do, that's what I would do. Yeah, I mean, it's also, you know, I'm not Asian. I have no connection to, you know, I'm not some sort of wannabe anything. I'm mixed with a million things, and I guess, well, the only Asian part, it's not like Japanese or Chinese or Korean or anything. But one of my great grandmothers on my mom's side was from India. That's the most Asian I got going. But I got nothing else. But I just reject mindlessly accepting every part of my culture just cause, you know, we got more freedom than that.
Why did you decide to make that a life goal?
Because it represented something that would train our nervous system and that would put us in sync with each other and give us a together task that we keep working on and come back together and come back to, and it would be something that would help us with our jiu-jitsu as well. So we just came up with it and covenanted that we will get it. Again?
Oh no, you paid me for saying the pretzels like
Good. I gotta get rid of these or else it'll be like, why'd you print those extra? Wasting all the department's money on everything. Anything else you want to ask about the paper if you're worried about it so that I can help you don't worry so much?
Can you give us just like an idea of like the state campus? How many?
I don't know.
Like just throw a number out there.
It's not like doing on one hand, like
Throw a number out there for you.
Yeah, under 5 maybe. Like,
under 5.
I don't know if you can do it less than 5.
You don't know.
I don't know what you're trying to describe. I don't know how long it takes to describe it. I don't know your philosophy until I read your paper.
but who has to know that in order to get
Yes. Yes. Have you noticed the rubric for this assignment? You did?
the one, like, I just, the one that says abstract knowledge to.
Well, that's really not a rubric. There's no rubric. Why?
Because everyone's philosophy is different.
That's a good component. Why else?
Because you're not actually giving us a grade on these.
Oh, yes, I am. Nice try. Huh? I see you, Amanda. I'll be back in just a second. Kyler?
So what's the average number of pages turned out on paper for like an A paper?
I have no idea. I honestly have no idea. That's a good question. I've been doing this for 32 years, and I've had some people who have written 30-page papers, and I've had some people who've gotten really good grades with, well, not much more than 5 pages. But it's really, the content was the issue, and the link was not really relevant. I mean, what's that? Well, this is all crap, but it's really long. I gotta give it something. No, I don't. Yes. Yes. I do not have a rubric because I want you to be creative with the paper. Do you think that you have to live your life by a rubric?
A lot of teachers do.
Not the artificiality of academia, but I mean your life. Because if you think you have a rubric, now some people absolutely need a rubric to live their life, and they make very good choices about their rubric. Some people join a monastery. And their life, for a decade at least, is going to be extremely rubric oriented. And for some people, that benefits them in some huge ways. Mostly, though, it represents rejecting the whole template that their life has taken on and completely like making a new scaffold. So they need to do that because they're escaping a rubric. And in that, they're being incredibly creative by incorporating that rubric. If you want to use a rubric for this, then find one and use it. Really. Design your rubric before you start the paper. What if you were the teacher and you were needing to grade this? You're not children. If I hired you to be my TA and I said, I want a rubric to go in the syllabus, we're going to have a rubric or anything, you don't think you could come up with a rubric? You've been living by them for a while now. You could do it. So you can make a rubric for yourself, say, I need the structure. Okay, make the structure before you start the project. And then the structure can be, now that's what I'm having to do for my dissertation. There's no rubric, there's a style sheet, and I told you guys you could choose either MLA or APA. But I don't have a rubric for my dissertation. I can design my own methodology. In fact, in my practicum that I'm doing right now, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm designing a research methodology for futures studies, for academic level futures studies in humanistic psychology that are mixed method, that are quantitative and qualitative. And that doesn't exist. So I'm having to design a thing, and then I have to include in that what criteria my dissertation committee will use to evaluate whether I've done a good job. So if you want a rubric, make one, and then follow it. Amanda?
I understand how like you don't want a rubric, like it's be creative and not have like a rubric for life. But the thing is that when you're being graded by someone else, how good
When you're what? I'm sorry.
when you're doing something for someone else to like grade or like evaluate, like how good something is depends on that person's opinion and that person's
Yes.
preference. So what are different characteristics of like essays that you've given A's to that like at least characteristics maybe? And not
Let me
definition?
comment on that. And that, when you say it like that, and whenever I think of it like that, whenever anyone thinks of it like that, it's like, so basically it just comes down to my opinion of what's good and what's not good, right?
Or more how to formulate our opinions.
No, I mean, isn't that true though? Yeah. The way it is, you're going, it comes down to what I think is good, right?
Yeah.
Do you realize what people are doing to you when they create a very detailed rubric with 6 levels down? Do you realize that at the bottom, that when you break it down into the smallest little detail thing, each one of those details, whether you did a good job on that detail or not depends on what? On the teacher's opinion. So it's like divide and conquer, so you don't realize it's a BS technique to keep you from thinking you have a leg to stand on when it's just your word against theirs for their value system. That's a trick. That's to keep you from just arguing because you go, oh, well, shoot, look. Yeah, okay, well, here's the 9 things he didn't like about it. So what? It still comes down to that person's opinion.
So then what is the best way for us to appeal to your value system?
To do philosophy. You don't have to have it sound like my philosophy, but it should actually be philosophy. Gregory and I were having quite a discussion about that kind of thing when he raised the issue about the difference between belief and what we're talking about here. Now, you can put what you believe, just recognize that it's a belief. And don't allow yourself to have it unless you've gone all the way as far as you can. If your belief contradicts incontrovertible fact, that's not even good religion. That's just stupid. Am I far off on that? And if you say, but it doesn't, show me. Show me that it doesn't. Or chase it back as far as you can chase it with what's available, and then say, and this is all we know about this. So from here on, it's all belief, and here's my belief. That's a perfectly respectable thing to do. And you have to end up doing it at the end of the day, but a philosopher won't do it skipping any steps on the way back. Okay?
So are we, just a quick question, are we supposed to do our paper more on, this is our philosophy, describe it, this is what it is, or this is why we value it?
I don't think you can, you can try to say that you value something, and you can acknowledge why it's likely that that's the values that you took on. But at the end of the day, at root, you value it because you value it. That's what makes it a value instead of just some proven fact. For instance, let's say that you're attracted to potential mates that have dark hair and you don't like light-colored hair. It might be the other way around. I don't want to pick on you, and I'm not asserting that that's the case, but let's just say it is the case. And somebody says, well, dude, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't have to make sense. I just like it. See, I like Bach, but I don't like Mozart as well as Bach. And I can prove why. No, there's no proof. It's just, it's my value.
I was just asking if it's more of like a observational paper or more of a critique. Like this is what it is what I, or this is what that is.
You know, by being philosophical, you'd have to be critiquing the thing you're observing. So it's not one or the other. You would be observing what it is you believe, and you might even be trying to figure it out, but critiquing your own position is something that philosophers do, and critiquing it mercilessly.
So I know you said that our philosophy could be religion tied into it and all that, and
But it's not. I'm not asking you to just try to use some academic sounding stuff to prove your religion.
right.
This is philosophy, and your religion probably impacts your philosophy. But this is not just, I need to find philosophical words to defend my faith here, or my church's teachings.
Right. I think I've been able to do that. You know what I mean, as far as making some philosophy paper. But is it okay to quote the Bible to prove or to give some backbone to what I'm thinking, along with other things? But
How does it give backbone philosophically to quote the Bible?
it's an anchor point to build my philosophy on in some.
Why?
Be-
Why is that philosophical?
I don't know.
I'm not saying it's not.
Yeah, I don't know right now. I'm just wondering how I can use it properly if I'm going to use it.
One thing that I sometimes do is I look for my philosophical positions and then I compare them to my church's teachings. Where do they overlap? For instance, one thing about philosophy is to talk about what am I? What's the reality of human beings? Well, the Adventist Church has a, quote, doctrine of man. God formed man of the dust of the ground. There's the body. Breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. There's the breath. And the vital spark, maybe. And man became a living soul. Man wasn't given a soul. Man became a soul. So by that definition, a soul is the sum part. It's like saying person.
So you could reference
So I would
that
say,
part.
wow, I noticed that there's that I have an affinity for philosophical things that fit with that. If you look at the Catholic theologians, you look at Aquinas, you look at Augustine, you look at any of the people that were doing the best they could to be faithful to the church and not get their head cut off, but still do philosophy. You can feel the tension on their philosophy to try to make their philosophy somehow religiously acceptable so that they didn't go to prison or get killed, and so that they weren't violating their conscience because they thought it was wrong to. But a philosopher would say, I see that going on in myself. I see why I have that affinity for that kind of position because it fits with what my church teaches. Like, the Adventist church teaches a separation of church and state. So in doing my political philosophy, I have that too. And I think I get that value from my church, but it is a value. You could argue the other side of it. But one thing philosophers do is they put all their values on the table and then they look at, do any of the values not fit with each other? Do you value something that can't coexist with something else? Like, I value marital fidelity, but I value variety of experience. So I want to go read the whole town, but I also want to be monogamous and faithful. You just can't do, a philosopher doesn't allow that. A religionist would allow that kind of logic. And then they would say, well, that doesn't fit. And they go, well, it's a mystery. Yeah, what it means is you're sloppy, now fix it. Or is it the reflection of something in 4 dimensions, so you have things that don't make sense in 5 dimensions, so it doesn't make sense in 4 dimensions? Show how that is.
Like if you think, serving others brings true happiness. Just to give you an example.
Yes.
And I would say, like, I saw Christ doing this. This motivates me to do this. I mean, is that, like, can I mention something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. You could, as a philosopher, you could believe that you could believe that this world is created by and sustained by a deity. And you could say that you don't believe it's a closed system. Well, why do you not believe it's a closed system? Don't start answering that by giving what you want to prove, so that you then you reason circularly. Don't do that. Don't say, well, because God said it. No. What do you have if you go to 0 and you put everything off the table, including the Bible, and then you start building it? Could you build it with intellectual honesty, and then the Bible gets put on the table after it earns its way there? Could you? Or do you make an exception for it? And then why do you make an exception for it? Because I just do. No, there's no. Or you say, well, because what it comes down to is, this is my value system, and it differs from some other people's value system. Like you said, doing kind things for other people, whatever. Valuing being pro-social instead of valuing being antisocial. So, that's doing kind things for other people. Why do you say you should do that? Is there a philosophical approach to why you should do that? Say, well, I value happiness. Everyone values happiness. I'm hedonic. And everybody actually is. And if anyone says they're not, I challenge, I throw down the gauntlet. And here's some people who disagree with me about this thing that we should help others, yada, yada. But then they still say they believe in happiness, yada, yada. Well, then here's research that says that when we do things for other people, that it actually activates the pleasure center in our brain and gives the experience they want. And what they're saying they think we should do, at the same time that they're saying that they believe happiness is their prime value, they're actually doing things like hoarding and being selfish. They're reducing their happiness. And we can show that in the laboratory. And they're going, well, they're irrational. And they have no device. They haven't accounted for why they've got things that are non-starters together on their table. So you can then discredit your opponent or an alternative viewpoint by saying, well, that's irrational. Mine's rational. I say I believe in happiness. That anyone does. From mosquitoes and earthworms to psychopaths. They value having pleasant feelings. And it just so happens I believe this, but I didn't just say, because the Bible says so. It does, and that's part of the reason I appreciate the Bible, but it's something that I can show from brain science is compatible with the reality of how happiness gets created. So I'm not being irrational. Does that make sense? And you say, now look, you know, once you come up with 50 or 100 of those things, and you go, wait a minute, the Bible is just full of those kinds of things. At least when I interpret it by this interpretation matrix, when I use this kind of exegesis as a rule, and when I have this doctrine of revelation and inspiration, how I can use Scripture is compatible with that. But if it's not, if you've got things you're teaching and preaching and believing that don't even fit with the other things you're teaching, preaching, and believing, you should have brought your philosophy to church. Right? Or you better have a darn good explanation for why it's the case, and it should make sense. You should be able to be faced with it and not say, oh yeah, screw it. That's what makes faith brittle. When you maintain stupidity in terms of mutually exclusive values and beliefs and practices, and you don't confront it, and then somebody or life circumstances force you to confront it, and you go, well, that's a crock. Then you no longer have your faith. Does that make sense? Why this is to strengthen your faith, not to risk your faith? It's to get you to do this hard stuff, and it's not without some risk, to make it so that it's not like an almost sure bet that you're not going to go very long until life knocks your faith right out of the park.
Makes sense.
Which is what most people have happen. Very few people that come up in the Seventh-day Adventist Church are still going to be Seventh-day Adventists, you know, in 20 years. This just isn't happening. And I feel badly about that because they'd be better off maintaining that belief system. That's not to say anything pejorative about anyone else's belief system or to say that it's a better one than anyone else's. I'm just saying, if they came up in it, even if they were abused by it and everything, but it's how they formed their first views of reality, they should continue to find a way to make it fit and to form a worldview that's philosophically something you could be proud of, that hangs together from their own scalp, from their own tradition. They'd be better off not changing tradition, not leaving the Adventist Church. And I believe that for everybody. Even if going to church is just one trigger after the next and you need to get it fixed, get it fixed. Don't just let it fester, you know, go get therapy. Peter, did you take a bit? Okay, I'm sorry, I ruined it. I ruined it. Who do we have that needs to do some presentations? How many are there? Let me see your hand. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Who's 8? Oh, you're 8.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't even care what order. You want to go?
Oh, no.
You don't want to go? Okay. You want to go? You look eager. Do it. And if there's anything else I can do to help so that you're not anxious about this thing and you can actually just use this writing exercise to further your own program, I want to help. I won't want you to be scared. Yeah, if you guys want to sell me questions from the presentations, I might buy them. Go ahead.
So the first thing that I got was George Berkeley, and he is actually an Irish philosopher, and he was born on March 12th, 1685. He's actually half he's half Irish, but he likes to be considered Irish, and he died at age 67. So Berkeley actually went to the school in 1906
there can be, instead there's only perception. And he also refers to this one quote, it's in Latin, it's like SESD perci, which is to be is to be perceived. So he's kind of going into conclusion of you thinking of yourself is that you're alive. So if you're alive, then if you're thinking of yourself, then you're alive. But if you're asleep, who's thinking of you? Are you really alive? Because no one is looking at you, or you're not thinking right now because you're sleeping. So that's pretty much his theory, and his ending conclusion actually came up with like, how is it that we are not real if we're not seen by others when we're sleeping. But he said that God is the ultimate perceiver. God is always watching with an unblinking perception and holds objects in existence even when we are not paying attention. That's my presentation.
Who is next? Okay, go ahead. Sit up.
Elephant movement here. All right. So the first one I have, you might not have heard of. His name's Socrates. So the first thing I thought of when I was looking up like things about him was, what is his full name? Because we always say Socrates. Come to find out, they only went by really one name, and then their like last name was their father, so it's Sophronisco. Or varying pronunciations depending on how you pronunciate that. It basically was like the son of a stonemason is what his last name means. He was born around 1470 BC in Athens, Greece. And his father was a stonemason, and his mother was a midwife. He married a woman named Xanthippe, something like that. And he died in 399 BC, which is like before but after because it's BC. So you're going from a bigger number to a small number. According to Xenophon, who was one of his followers, he had quite a few, like tons and tons of followers. His wife was not happy with the philosopher profession. She complained about why he didn't want to support his own family, but Socrates allegedly was claimed that he was more interested in the intellectual upbringing of the youth in Athens rather than bringing up his own sons. According to Plato's records, this is just really interesting, I thought, Socrates served as an armed infantry in several battles and was absolutely fearless and courageous and showed the utmost valor. So besides being like a he was like supposed to be like really, really intense on the battlefield. According to a symposium by Plato, Socrates was short and stocky with bulging eyes and a snub nose. So he wasn't one of the most attractive people physically.
He was ugly.
Not most attractive. That's how you word it.
Everyone called him ugly.
But despite the bulging eyes and other flaws that you might pick, everyone was attracted to him, or all of his followers were very much attracted to him because of his brilliant mind and riveting thoughts. So some of his accomplishments, his biggest one, the thing that most people recognize Socrates is the Socratic method, which is he developed is basically just question what you know, like what do you think that you know, and what are you actually defending or opposing. He developed many enemies because of this. There's a story that he was trying to defend what the better interest of the democracy was, and he boiled down the argument to such simplistic terms that the people that he was arguing with got really, really mad at him, and all the people that were going to be benefited took his side, and then everyone got really, really frustrated with him. One thing that was really interesting is that because these writings are so old, Plato, who had like a crush on Socrates, adopted his writing style. So many of the things that are written can't really be distinguished between Plato and Socrates. Like some things we think Plato wrote, but like it could have been Socrates, and something Socrates wrote, it could have been Plato because Plato would sometimes take what Socrates said, write it down in like a similar Socratic writing style, and that's there's like a little bit of jumbledness there. So the biggest thing was that he made everyone question why he or she lives and what they're currently doing. He thought that the government should be run by philosophers because everything else is like bad. Like everyone else has like their own personal vendettas kind of thing. This is interesting. During his last year, one of his relatives, named Critias, overthrew the Democratic government, and known as the 30 Tyrants, and they ruled for about a year, and then the Athenian democracy was reinstated. So you can see kind of why there'd be already tension to begin with, because his relatives were already taking down the democracy. So there was a thing that said he treated treated people with treated young people philosophically, and he did that in a way that midwives treat their patients. So like he tried to like give people knowledge that would help them grow. And he also believed that he was a great matchmaker to pupils and their advisors, like people way to learn, so you could match people's learning styles together. One thing that when he argued with someone is he always showcased his ignorance. He'd never let people know what he really knew or really was thinking. So that's something that I think we might all be able to take to heart, is like he showcased his ignorance so that people never knew like how much he actually knew until like he delivered like what he was thinking, and then it just tumbled down. And he encouraged people to focus on the pursuit of virtues as opposed to the pursuit of wealth, which was very common back in the day. And as you can see in current day Athens, is that they're not very wealthy. He invited others to concentrate on friendships and community as opposed to the pursuit of wealth. And then just an interesting fact about his death. He was accused of both refused and recognized the gods, and it was recognized by the state that he was corrupting the youth. He presented his case to a jury, and they voted on whether he was guilty or innocent. He lost 280 votes to 220 votes. And then he was asked, his punishment was to be death, but they asked, like, do you have another opposition? Like, do you have something else besides death that you'd want to serve out? Like maybe some prison time or something else? He said, you should be paying me for what I've done for this society. So he was also really kind of a cocky person, from what I've read.
They would have let him just leave, too.
Yeah, they said
banishment from Athens.
Yeah, he would also left, but he thought that'd be wrong because he believed in such community that you shouldn't leave the place that you're trying to build up. It would be like kind of like shameful. So they decided that like you're gonna die because you're an ignorant person that wouldn't accept our belief system. And so they decided on hemlock poisoning, and he took that with like pride. Like he just like drank the hemlock and then laid down and died. So, and that's kind of the like underlining mindset of Socrates. And that's the end of the presentation.
Una más? Okay.
I did mine on Jean-Paul Sartre. He was a French philosopher. He was born in 1905 and he died in 1980 at the age of 74. He was a novelist and a literary critic. He was an officer in the Navy. He was short and had heavy glasses because he had like this lazy eye, and he thought he was really ugly. He was a key figure in philosophy of existentialism and a leading figure in the 20th century French philosophy and Marxism. He declined official honor, so like they tried to grant him a Nobel Prize, but he rejected it because he thought that a writer should never allow himself to be turned into an institution. He's famous for his book, Being and Nothingness, and it's a phenomenological essay on ontology. And its main purpose was to assert like the individual's existence as prior to their essence. And he had an overriding concern of like free will. So he believed that existence comes before essence, and that human beings don't have like a pre-established purpose or nature. So So like we don't have anything that like we're supposed to be, like we aren't like born to do anything, but we're born and then we're supposed to like figure out like what like we're supposed to do. And the basic human predicament is like that we're forced to choose like what we will become. So we have like a really big emphasis on like freedom and like choosing that. He did not believe that a common human nature could be the source of mortality, and he believed that we're responsible for everything that we do and we are, and we choose like how we feel about our parents. Like we can't choose like who our parents are and stuff like that, but it's our choice to like decide how we feel about them. And if you don't, like that's bad faith. He like termed that bad faith. He had like 3 theories in like all emotive terms. So, like one of them is anguish, and he defined that as what we feel when we recognize that what we choose is not just for ourselves, but it's for everyone. And like we can't prove that we're being right. So like if you choose something's moral for you, then like it must be moral for everyone. So that's like a really big like burden. So that's what he defined as like anguish. So like you have that like feeling of like pressure, like you might be wrong and stuff like that. And then he also had despair, which was realizing that we have to depend on others without being sure how they will act. So like the election, like we count on like others like to like vote for like who we think would be right, but we have despair because we can't like force them. And so he said because of this we should commit ourselves to a course of action because there's no reality except in action. And then another term that he had was abandonment, and that's when all things that seem to help us, like such as God, are not like really things we can depend on. So he was an atheist, and he says that only we can determine how we actually behave, and there's no God to like warrant our moral choices. Yeah. Oh, and existentialism is defined as the approach that emphasizes the existence of the individual person as free and responsible in determining their own development through acts of the will.
I don't think if we start another one,